Know your place, you pathetic temporary placeholder. Those words slipped easily and coldly from my younger sister's lips. They did not echo through the spacious kitchen with its high ceilings and expensive custom cabinetry. They simply hung in the quiet morning air, filled with such toxic confidence that it felt as if she had rehearsed the phrase in advance. I stood perfectly still, barefoot, feeling the chill of the ceramic tile, and looked at Chloe. She leaned casually against the white marble kitchen island, holding a mug of herbal tea. She wore an expensive silk blouse that fit perfectly on her narrow shoulders, her glossy blonde hair cascading down her back. Her arms were crossed, her chin held high. It was the exact posture of superiority she had been perfecting since childhood. A smug, victorious smile played on her face. She had just told me straight to my face that she was going to attend my husband's annual corporate gala as his plus one. She had decided to play the role of the perfect, stunning trophy wife, a role she believed I had never been capable of fulfilling. She called me a temporary placeholder in my own life. Brad, the man I had been married to for 5 years, stood just a few feet away from her. He did not drop his coffee mug. He did not look surprised, nor did he make a single move to defend me from those humiliating words. He did not demand that she leave our house immediately. Instead, he calmly took a sip of his dark roast, keeping his eyes glued to his smartphone screen. He scrolled through his emails as if he had just heard a mundane comment about the weather in Portland, rather than his sister-in-law degrading his wife. His silence was not confusion. It was consent. At that exact moment, everything inside me should have shattered. Any other woman might have screamed, thrown a fit, demanded an immediate divorce, or simply collapsed under the weight of the betrayal. I felt the burn of betrayal, too, the heavy iron ring of humiliation tightening around my chest. But I did not cry, I did not beg, and I did not raise my voice. I am a senior risk analyst and crisis manager for a Fortune 500 supply chain logistics firm. My entire career has been built on staring down the most complex disasters, from corporate bankruptcies and shattered supply chains to multi-million-dollar fraud schemes, and turning that chaos into clear, actionable calculations. I assess risks, I project losses, and I mitigate fallout. When Chloe called me a pathetic placeholder, my heart rate did not spike in panic. On the contrary, it became steady and rhythmic. A cold, analytical mode switched on in my brain, pushing all emotion aside. The man I loved was silently allowing another woman to take my place. My own sister was happily celebrating her cruel victory right inside my home. Everything I had built and earned through my own hard work was now being weaponized against me. I looked at Brad. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The silence grew heavier. Finally, he looked up from his phone, met my eyes, and let out a mildly annoyed sigh. He looked at me as if it genuinely irritated him that I was still standing there, ruining their perfect morning routine with my silent presence. "I am not responsible for your deep-seated insecurities, Sarah," Chloe said, layering her voice with fake softness and mock sympathy. "Brad needs someone who understands the world of high-level networking and corporate schmoozing, someone who knows how to work a room and be the center of attention. You are always so tense, obsessed with your spreadsheets and risk models. Just accept the situation for what it is." I did not say a single word. I just turned around and walked away. My bare feet glided silently over the cold floor as I walked down the long hallway, past the expensive framed wedding photos and curated artwork I had handpicked to turn this house into a real family home. I stepped into my home office, pulled the heavy oak door shut, and turned the deadbolt. The quiet click echoed in my mind like the starting gun of a tactical operation. I sat down at my solid mahogany desk and rested my fingers on the cold aluminum chassis of my laptop. I was not a temporary placeholder. I was the legal owner of the very ground they were standing on. This house belonged to me. I bought it with my own money. My flawless FICO credit score was the only thing that made this purchase possible. But before I could launch my financial monitoring software and begin a forensic audit of my own marriage, my cell phone vibrated sharply on the desk. The caller ID showed a number from Brad's public relations firm. It was Haley, his junior assistant. She was a sweet, slightly inexperienced girl, fresh out of college. Usually, she was always rushing and apologizing, desperately trying to keep up with Brad's endless demands. I took a deep breath, leveled my voice to a calm, professional tone, and answered, "Good morning, Haley." "Oh, Sarah, hi. I am so sorry to bother you at home so early." Her voice sounded frantic. I could hear the buzz of a busy corporate office through the speaker. "I have been trying to reach Chloe all morning, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. The boutique is starting to panic." I froze. Why was my husband's assistant desperately trying to reach my sister? My analytical mind instantly flagged the discrepancy. What exactly do you need from her, Haley? I asked. Brad asked me to double-check the measurements for the gala dress before the final fitting this afternoon, she explained quickly. I just need to confirm if we are keeping the waist size the same or letting it out 1/4 of an inch. The boutique is on a tight schedule, and considering it is a $12,000 haute couture gown, they want to be absolutely precise before they cut the fabric. A $12,000 dress. That number seemed to hang suspended in the air. $12,000. My husband, who for the past few months had been complaining that his corporate bonuses were tied up, the same man who, just 3 weeks ago, asked me to pay the property taxes out of my personal savings, was buying my sister a $12,000 dress. He was funding her entire look for an event where she planned to publicly parade around as his perfect trophy wife. My grip on the phone tightened, but my voice remained perfectly steady. Haley, I said in a flat tone, burying the storm raging inside me. Leave the waist size exactly as it is. She will fit into it perfectly. Thank you so much, Sarah. You are a lifesaver. Have a great day. The call disconnected. I gently placed the phone back onto the desk. $12,000 does not just magically appear in a checking account. I opened my laptop, entered my master decryption password, and stared at the glowing monitors. It was time to find out exactly how deep this financial rot went. I needed to know how my remarkably average husband was funding his new luxury lifestyle. To understand why I did not immediately march back into the kitchen, demand answers, and throw an emotional tantrum, you have to understand the history I had been carrying inside me for years. My family dysfunction did not appear overnight. It was not one massive tragedy that changed everything in a single day. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of my personal boundaries year after year. I grew up as the invisible child. My parents, Richard and Linda, were standard middle-class suburbanites, but they possessed a toxic, desperate need to appear wealthy. My mother had once dreamed of being a fine artist but abandoned those plans in her youth. When Chloe was born, Linda funneled all her shattered ambitions and delusions of grandeur into her youngest daughter. From day one, Chloe was the golden child. She was loud, demanding, conventionally beautiful, and entirely irresponsible. I was the exact opposite. Quiet, diligent, reliable. I was the one expected to clean up other people's messes, fix their problems, and remain out of the spotlight. The first major entry in my internal ledger of disappointments was my college fund. In high school, I worked several grueling jobs. I tutored advanced calculus, worked closing shifts at a diner, and did freelance data entry. It was all for one goal, to save $25,000 for my university tuition. But instead of celebrating my 18th birthday, my mother sat me down at the dining table with tears streaming down her face. She begged me to transfer every cent of my savings into a new account for Chloe. She needs to enroll in this elite, incredibly prestigious private arts program in New York, Linda pleaded emotionally. Sarah, you are so smart. You will easily get a full scholarship. You are strong and independent. But Chloe is different. She has a fragile, creative soul. She needs this opportunity more than you do. I handed over the money not because I failed to calculate the consequences, but because I still desperately wanted to feel that they loved me. Chloe lasted exactly 6 months in that elite New York program. Then she dropped out and flew to Tulum, Mexico, to backpack with a nightclub DJ she had met at a party. The money vanished. The second massive disappointment was Brad. 2 years into our marriage, back when things still felt happy, he decided he absolutely needed to buy a brand new Porsche 911. At the time, he was just a mid-level PR manager, but he firmly believed he needed a 6-figure sports car to project an image of extreme success and lure in high-net-worth clients for his firm. One evening, he brought home dealership paperwork and asked me to co-sign the massive auto loan, using my robust investment portfolio as collateral. I did not react emotionally. I did what I do best. I ran a risk assessment. The rapid depreciation of a luxury sports car, the astronomical premium insurance rates, the suffocating monthly payments. From a financial standpoint, it was a reckless, idiotic decision. I looked him dead in the eye and said, no. He stood right here in this office, his face flushed with genuine rage, and called me a heartless, cold, calculating machine. He told me I was incapable of supporting his dreams because I lacked vision, and that my obsession with financial security made me incredibly boring. The third chapter of this disaster was currently living in my house, entirely rent-free, in the furnished first-floor guest suite. A year ago, Chloe showed up on our porch with 3 massive designer suitcases and a completely maxed out credit card. She claimed she was going through a severe creative burnout and needed a peaceful sanctuary to restore her artistic inspiration. My parents relentlessly pressured me. They called daily, guilt-tripping me about family loyalty until I finally caved and let her stay. From that moment on, she began aggressively expanding her footprint in my life. I regularly found my expensive La Mer face creams completely emptied and tossed in the trash. My favorite $400 Chanel perfume was drained to the bottom. When I confronted her about stealing my things, she just rolled her eyes, sighed heavily, and called me petty. Brad always took her side. He told me to relax and reminded me that family is supposed to share everything. But family does not share husbands, and family does not spend $12,000 behind your back. I logged into our joint banking portal. As a senior risk analyst, I had spent my entire career hunting down hidden liabilities and corporate embezzlement. I knew one universal truth: people always leave a trail. They think that if they delete a text message or shred a paper receipt, they are safe. But money never disappears without a trace. Every transaction leaves a digital footprint. First, I audited Brad's primary checking account. Nothing unusual. Coffee runs, dry cleaning bills, basic daily expenses. Next, I checked his individual savings account. The balance was pathetic, hovering just under $3,000. So where did the cash for a haute couture dress come from? I logged into my premium credit monitoring dashboard. My FICO score was practically perfect, the result of a decade of strict discipline and caution. Because of my flawless history, I had a massive home equity line of credit approved and sitting on standby for genuine emergencies like medical disasters, major roof repairs, or sudden unemployment. I had never touched it. I pulled the credit report. A bright red security alert flashed across the screen. 3 days ago, a temporary security freeze had been lifted. The initiator was Brad. He had used a secure bypass code he kept from when we refinanced the mortgage together 2 years ago. I opened the transaction ledger for the credit line. My heart beat slowly, but a terrifying, icy rage began to pool in my stomach. There it was. A pending charge for exactly $12,000 to an exclusive bridal and evening wear boutique in the Pearl District that only accepted clients by appointment. But that was not the only hit. My eyes scanned down the glowing monitor, logging every single digit with lethal precision. $4,000 to a luxury travel agency, $2,000 for a non-refundable deposit at a 5-star hotel, $800 to a Michelin star restaurant famous for its exclusive tasting menu. I clicked into the travel agency invoice and expanded the payment metadata. That was where I found the details that cemented my worst suspicions. The vendor data loaded slowly, revealing a complete travel itinerary: 2 first-class tickets to Paris, France. Departure date: the second week of next month. Passenger names: Brad and Chloe. This was not just some cheap secret affair in a motel. They were meticulously planning a wildly expensive, romantic intercontinental getaway, and they were funding it entirely with my resources. They had secretly hijacked my emergency credit line and our joint tax returns to bankroll their infidelity. They were literally forcing me to finance my own betrayal. The sheer audacity was staggering. They thought I was so buried in my spreadsheets, so naive, so conditioned since childhood to be a compliant doormat, that I would never audit the accounts. They figured they could slowly bleed my assets dry, steal my husband, burn through my cash, and then laugh at my boring, serious nature over a glass of expensive French wine. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair. The cold blue light of the monitors illuminated the dark office. Deep in the recesses of my mind, a calm, nearly mechanical process began to compile. This was not blind fury. This was a system spinning up to completely neutralize a threat. They decided to play games with my capital. They had absolutely no idea what a corporate risk analyst is capable of when the margin of error disappears. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a military-grade encrypted hard drive. "What else are you hiding, Brad?" I whispered to the empty room. "How deep did the rot go?" When you uncover a critical vulnerability in a complex financial ecosystem, you never immediately patch it and alert the network. First, you observe. You trace the data flow, locate the source of the infection, and map the full scale of the breach before executing a scorched earth protocol. I launched a full forensic financial audit of Brad's life. For months, I had noticed red flags but consciously chose to ignore them. I accepted his flimsy excuses because I knew pressing him would trigger another massive family argument and draw the wrath of my parents. But the illusions were gone now. I accessed our joint IRS tax portal and pulled his most recent W-2s, along with the direct deposit history from his PR firm. Instantly, the anomaly glared back at me. Something was very wrong. Brad was always bragging to anyone who would listen that he was pulling in a massive mid-six-figure salary. He wore custom-tailored suits, sported a designer watch, and treated a casual dinner with friends like a summit of world leaders. But the numbers on the screen told a drastically different story. I ran a variance analysis on his payroll deposits over the last 6 months and spotted the cliff. Exactly 6 months ago, his bi-weekly direct deposits plummeted by almost 40%. I ran the calculation twice. I checked the net versus gross differentials. There was no error. His income had genuinely collapsed. I booted up a proprietary corporate risk assessment tool I used at work to vet third-party vendors, and pulled Brad's professional profile. What I saw next made me stop breathing for a second. His official corporate title loaded on the screen. I stared at the text. He was no longer the vice president of public relations. He was now listed as a senior account executive. He had been demoted half a year ago. Every single puzzle piece violently snapped into place. Brad was not an ultra-successful executive who had been seduced by a young, glamorous woman. He was a man who had lost his status, his influence, and his power. A man desperately treading water to maintain the illusion of wealth. His ego was the only valuable thing he had left, and his absolute greatest fear was looking like a failure in front of his peers. So, rather than coming to me like a mature adult to rebudget our lifestyle, he doubled down on the lie. He kept buying custom suits. He kept paying for absurdly expensive business lunches. He desperately needed Chloe to worship him, to make him feel like a powerful titan of industry who could shower her with anything she wanted. But his actual salary could no longer support the charade. That was when he started raiding my credit lines to fund his counterfeit reality. He put on a spectacular theater production of wealth and success for my sister, using my flawless credit score as his endless ATM. I sat in front of the screen, almost disgusted by the sheer pathetic nature of it all. For a brief, fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for him. Chloe actually thought she had hit the jackpot. She believed she was stealing a powerful, wealthy executive who would spend the rest of his life burying her in diamond jewelry, designer handbags, and luxury European vacations. She had no idea she was sleeping with a heavily indebted fraud who was tanking his own career and financing her fairy tale with his wife's money. A sharp burst of laughter echoed from the hallway. I instantly muted the computer and stood up. I walked silently to the office door and pressed my ear against the cool wood. Brad and Chloe were arguing. They were speaking in hushed, frantic whispers, trying not to alert me. "You promised you would buy me the Hermes bag before the gala tonight." Chloe's voice was demanding and shrill. The smug superiority she had used to humiliate me earlier was completely gone. All the senior partners' wives carry Birkins. If I am going to walk in there on your arm and stand next to you, I cannot be seen carrying that cheap last-season Prada clutch. It will be incredibly embarrassing. "Chloe, baby, please," Brad whispered back, his voice vibrating with stress and anxiety. "I told you, my massive quarterly bonus is currently frozen in an escrow account. I am working through the red tape with my wealth manager. You already have a $12,000 custom gown. Just give me a few weeks on the bag. I swear to God, I will have it before our flight to Paris. I don't want to wait until Paris," she snapped. I heard the sharp click of her heel striking the hardwood floor in frustration. Sarah has 3 authentic designer bags just sitting in her closet. She doesn't even use them. They are still in the dust covers. Maybe I will just take one of hers. She is way too boring and lacks the style to pull them off anyway. A heavy pause followed. "Do not touch her things right now," Brad warned, genuine panic bleeding into his voice for the first time. "We need her to stay completely calm and oblivious until the end of the month. As soon as the cash-out refinance on the house closes, I will have a massive lump sum of liquid cash, and then we figure out our next move. Just be sweet to her and let her stay comfortable for a little while longer. We just need time." Exit strategy. Cash-out refinance. Those words turned the blood in my veins to ice. This was no longer just a secret affair or a standard betrayal. Brad was plotting to trick me into signing new mortgage refinance documents, liquidate hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity that I had spent years building, and steal that cash to fund his new life with my sister. He was planning to leave me buried under a mountain of catastrophic debt while they drank vintage champagne in Paris. I stepped back from the door. My hands were remarkably steady. The pain, the heartbreak, and the shock from the morning were entirely vaporized. They were replaced by a cold, absolute, surgical resolve. They thought I was just a boring woman with spreadsheets and calculators. They thought my reliance on logic made me weak and easy to manipulate. They were about to learn a very hard lesson. Logic is the most ruthless weapon on earth when aimed correctly. I walked back to my desk and opened my personal email. Sitting in my inbox was an email flagged with a red high-priority icon. It was from Diana, the formidable managing director of the North American headquarters for Apex Global Partners in Manhattan, New York. 3 weeks ago, Apex had offered me a position that was practically impossible to turn down. They wanted me as their global director of risk management at their Wall Street office. It was a monumental promotion, an astronomical salary, a generous stock option package, and the rare mandate to build an entire division from the ground up. But I had declined it. I turned it down because Brad threw a massive fit, claiming a move to the East Coast would destroy his local PR networking base. My mother cried on the phone for 2 hours, accusing me of abandoning the family for my own selfish greed. I had rejected the greatest professional milestone of my life just to keep the parasites feeding on me comfortable. I opened the email. The offer was still on the table. HR had given me a hard deadline, Friday at 5:00 p.m. After that, they were moving on to their second choice candidate. I checked the digital clock on my monitor. It was Thursday afternoon. I hit reply, typed exactly 2 words, offer accepted, and clicked send. The screen refreshed. The decision was made. I was permanently leaving this city, but I was not going to quietly pack my bags, cry into a pillow, and walk away like a defeated victim. I was going to systematically demolish the entire infrastructure they had built, on top of my kindness. I would leave them with exactly what they wanted, each other, and the catastrophic financial apocalypse they had engineered themselves. Let's see how long true love lasts when the ATM runs out of cash. The rest of Thursday moved in a bizarre, almost cinematic rhythm. I was in full preparation mode, cold, precise, calculating every microvariable. I moved through my own house like an invisible ghost. When Brad passed me in the hallway heading to the kitchen, I offered a polite, vacant smile. When Chloe loudly complained that the Wi-Fi was too slow for her streaming services, I did not react. I was no longer an active participant in this pathetic domestic theater. I was now the lead auditor of my own life, silently gathering the final pieces of evidence before shutting the rogue system down forever. The landline on my desk rang sharply, breaking the silence. The caller ID flashed Aunt Carol's name. Carol was my mother's older sister, the central hub of all family gossip, and the designated enforcer my parents deployed whenever they needed to bully me back into submission. Every time I tried to establish a boundary or deny Chloe a handout, Aunt Carol would magically call to lecture me on family duty and proper behavior. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. My face remained an emotionless mask. "Sarah, sweetheart." Her voice oozed with fake concern. "Your mother tells me you have been acting very distant lately." And Chloe mentioned that poor Brad is incredibly stressed out with his high-level corporate work. She paused, adopting the tone of someone dispensing profound wisdom. "You know, maintaining a successful marriage requires a soft, feminine touch. You can't just sit in your office staring at numbers all day and ignore your husband's emotional needs. He is a powerful man. He needs a wife who actually tries to keep him happy." I stared at the massive spreadsheet glowing on my monitor. The data column tracking Brad's hidden credit card debt was climbing. The total principal now exceeded $40,000. "He is definitely a very powerful man, Aunt Carol," I replied evenly. "I am absolutely certain he is getting all the physical and emotional support he needs right now." "Just be careful, Sarah," she warned. "Men have wandering eyes, and you know yourself that you get way too wrapped up in your boring little risk models. Maybe go out, buy some nice lingerie, cook a pot roast, and put the spark back in your marriage before someone else catches his eye." A ghost of a smile touched my lips. "Thank you for the invaluable advice, Aunt Carol. I will be sure to give him exactly the amount of attention he deserves." I ended the call before she could launch into another guilt trip. I no longer had the bandwidth for their psychological warfare. Our entire family dynamic relied on a single point of failure, my desperate need for their validation and love. But that vulnerability was patched. Their words were just background noise now. I stepped out of the office and walked into the living room to grab my laptop charger. The house was dead quiet. Brad had gone to his boutique gym, likely trying to maintain his alpha male aesthetic. Chloe was off getting a $200 customized facial, undoubtedly charging it to my now frozen credit card. Sitting on the glass coffee table was the communal iPad. The screen was awake. Chloe, in her usual careless rush, had forgotten to close Safari. I glanced down. Typed into the search bar was, "Early pregnancy symptoms week 4. I stopped dead, the air catching in my lungs. The spacious room suddenly felt suffocatingly small. A baby. I slowly picked up the silver tablet and tapped the browser history. It was a goldmine of desperation. Pages upon pages of expecting mother forums, articles on maximizing child support payouts, and specific queries on how to leverage a pregnancy for a massive divorce settlement under Oregon state law. My stomach twisted. A child. They were planning to drag an innocent life into this nightmare and use it as leverage to trap me in a decade-long legal bloodbath. This was an entirely new stratosphere of betrayal. It was the point of no return. But the corporate analyst in my brain rebooted the system. Chloe was sloppy. She was brilliant at creating drama, but utterly incompetent at projecting long-term variables. I closed Safari and opened the Amazon Prime app on the tablet. She was still logged into our shared account. I went straight to the hidden archived orders, and there it was, placed 2 days ago. Next day shipping. Custom novelty ultrasound image. Authentic medical-grade paper. Prank your friends. Price, $29.99. I stared at the digital receipt, and a harsh, bitter laugh escaped my throat. There was no baby. It was a cheap counterfeit. She had ordered a fake sonogram to shove in Brad's face, or perhaps to use in a theatrical meltdown in front of me. Her strategy was transparent. Play the vulnerable, expecting mother, force Brad to accelerate the timeline, and extract maximum collateral during the divorce. She was attempting to outmaneuver a woman who calculated geopolitical supply chain collapses, using a $30 piece of paper. The revulsion I felt was indescribable. It wasn't even betrayal anymore. It was a direct insult to my intelligence. I wiped the app history, placed the iPad back on the table exactly where I found it, and walked briskly back to my office. It was time to finalize the executive summary. I booted up a secure legal communications portal and drafted an encrypted message to my attorney, Rachel. She was an absolute shark in corporate litigation. Last year, my forensic accounting had saved her firm from a devastating tax liability. She owed me big. I attached all the compiled evidence, the Amazon receipt, the shadow debt accounts, Brad's demotion paperwork, and the itinerary for the Paris trip. Then I typed the directive, "Rachel, I am initiating a zero-tolerance exit protocol. I need a total freeze on all joint credit lines implemented no later than 5:00 p.m. Friday. Strip my name from all Geico and State Farm auto insurance policies. Terminate Brad as the primary beneficiary on all 401 and life insurance accounts immediately. Draft the divorce petition citing severe financial fraud and dissipation of marital assets. No mercy." 5 minutes later, the reply flashed on screen. Message received. Asset protection lockdown initiated. Have a safe flight to New York. The process server will hand him the papers at his office Monday morning. I closed the laptop. The sharp snap of the aluminum lid sounded like a judge's gavel. The countdown timer was officially running. I had exactly 24 hours left in this house. 24 hours to pack my existence, scrub my digital footprint, and watch them prep for a corporate gala built entirely on fraud. They wanted to play pretend family. Fine, but I was taking the foundation with me. The house, the capital, and the financial security. Let's see how well their epic romance survives when the funding gets cut. Friday arrived with a crackling, electric tension vibrating through the walls of the house. Today was the day of the highly anticipated corporate gala, the day my husband planned to debut his mistress to his executive board, funded by money he stole from his wife. I woke up early, called into my firm, and used a sick day. I told Brad I was suffering from a blinding migraine and would be bedridden in a dark room all day. He barely glanced in my direction. He stood at the kitchen counter, aggressively shaking a protein mixer. "Just rest, Sarah," he said, dripping with artificial sympathy. "I'll ask Chloe to tag along as my +1 tonight. I don't want the partners thinking I'm showing up alone. We have to project the right image for the board. It's critical for my next promotion." "Of course," I whispered softly, pulling the blanket up to my chin. "I hope you both have an unforgettable evening." As soon as I heard the heavy rumble of his engine back out of the driveway, I threw off the blanket. The migraine theater was over. I had exactly 8 hours until their red carpet debut. I moved through the massive house like a phantom, silent, untraceable, and terrifyingly efficient. I dragged my hard-shell Samsonite suitcase down from the top shelf of the walk-in closet. I wasn't packing memories. I wasn't taking the sentimental garbage that anchored me to this miserable life. I packed strictly the essentials: original financial documents, encrypted backup drives, and the antique heirloom jewelry my grandmother had left me. Everything else stayed exactly where it was. The cheap jewelry Brad bought out of guilt, the conservative clothes my mother forced on me, the generic home goods art we bought on our honeymoon. I left it all. Using vacuum seal bags, I compressed my heavy winter coats and tailored blazers, burying them at the bottom of the luggage. While I efficiently condensed my entire life into a 50-pound box, I could hear bass thumping from the guest bathroom at the end of the hall. Chloe was blasting top 40 pop hits from a Bluetooth speaker. I walked past the cracked door and paused in the shadows. She stood in front of the vanity ring light in a sheer silk robe. In her hand was my $400 Chanel perfume. She sprayed it aggressively over her neck and wrists, showing zero regard for the cost. She hummed along to the music, adjusting her hair, completely mesmerized by her own reflection in the mirror. I watched her for a few seconds. The dichotomy was almost poetic. She was literally drowning herself in the luxury I had bled to acquire, gearing up to hijack my life, completely oblivious to the fact that the prize she was trying to steal had already been hollowed out. I felt absolutely no anger. The rage had burned off hours ago. Instead, I felt like a lead scientist observing a lab rat running a maze. She was sprinting full speed toward the mousetrap, completely unaware of the spring mechanism. By 3:00 p.m., the house looked untouched. To a casual observer, nothing had changed. My blue toothbrush was still in its holder. My soft slippers rested perfectly beside my nightstand. But legally, financially, and digitally, I had already ceased to exist in that space. At 4:30, the hired transportation pulled up to the curb. It was a massive, obnoxiously long, Lincoln stretch limo. Brad had booked it specifically to flex on his coworkers. I knew for a fact the charge was sitting on my emergency credit card as a pending authorization. But tomorrow morning, when the vendor tried to clear the final hold, they were going to get a hard decline. Brad stepped into the foyer wearing a rented tuxedo. The buttons strained slightly against his midsection. He looked incredibly tense, a sheen of nervous sweat on his forehead as he obsessively checked his Rolex. A moment later, Chloe appeared. She descended the hardwood staircase wearing the $12,000 haute couture gown, deep emerald silk, shimmering under the chandelier. It was cut dangerously low, wildly inappropriate for a conservative corporate dinner. She looked spectacular and entirely out of place. "How do we look?" Brad asked, adjusting his black bow tie in the hallway mirror. He desperately needed validation. I stood at the top of the landing in oversized gray sweatpants, playing the exhausted, sickly wife to perfection. They had absolutely no idea the ground beneath them had already collapsed. "You both look exactly like who you really are," I said quietly. My voice echoed down the staircase. Chloe smirked. The double meaning flew miles over her head. "Don't wait up, Sarah. We'll probably go out for drinks with the executive suite at that exclusive lounge in the Pearl District after the gala. Brad has to network if he wants that VP slot." "Have the night you deserve," I replied, and walked away. The heavy mahogany front door slammed shut. I walked to the upstairs window and watched the obnoxious stretch limo roll down the tree-lined street until it disappeared. The silence that rushed in to fill the house was deafening. But it wasn't a lonely silence. It was the silence of absolute control. I walked downstairs to the smart home command terminal mounted on the kitchen wall. I had designed, coded, and installed the entire security network myself. Brad never bothered to learn it. He always said tech was my department, and he didn't care about passwords or firewalls. He was right. It was my department. I logged in using root administrator credentials. A few keystrokes later, Brad's user profile was permanently deleted. Chloe's guest access was revoked. The master control pin was randomized to a string of numbers only I knew. I engaged the heavy-duty electronic deadbolts on the front and back doors and severed the connection to the garage door receivers, turning their key fobs into useless plastic bricks. Then, I grabbed my heavy suitcase, rolled it out the side door, and locked the manual deadbolt with my physical key. I walked to the edge of the property, looked down at the brass key in the palm of my hand, and dropped it through the metal grate of the storm drain. It vanished into the black water with a faint splash. The house was sealed. It was now a digital fortress. They were out drinking top-shelf liquor, completely unaware that when they returned in the dead of night, They would be locked out of a home they no longer had any legal or digital right to enter. My Uber Black pulled up at exactly 5:15 p.m. As I slid into the leather back seat, my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, my lawyer. All assets successfully firewalled. Credit lines frozen. You are clear. I looked out the tinted window as the SUV merged onto the highway. The Oregon sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. I was no longer a temporary placeholder. I was the architect of my own reality. And the best part was just beginning. The international terminal at PDX was a chaotic symphony of rolling luggage, intercom announcements, and hurried goodbyes. I moved through the crowd with surgical precision, gripping a first-class boarding pass for a red-eye flight to JFK. I cleared TSA pre-check without casting a single glance backward at the city I was abandoning. Within the hour, I was sitting in my designated pod in the first-class cabin. The plush leather seats swallowed me whole. For the first time in half a decade, I didn't feel a sense of loss. I felt pure, unadulterated freedom. The cabin lights dimmed to a futuristic neon blue. A flawlessly dressed flight attendant approached, offering a steaming hot towel and a crystal flute of vintage champagne. I accepted both with a genuine smile. Settling into the massive seat, I pulled out my leather-bound moleskin notebook and did what I do best. I crunched the numbers. Not emotions, not memories, raw data. 5 years. Roughly 1,800 days of constant compromise. Approximately $85,000 systematically drained from my accounts to prop up Brad's fragile ego. Thousands of hours spent shrinking my own ambitions, hiding my intelligence, and biting my tongue just to make sure he didn't feel emasculated in my presence. That was the invoice for playing the good wife. The exact same invoice I paid playing the invisible daughter in a family that worshipped an artificial idol. I raised my champagne glass toward the small oval window. To a catastrophic return on investment, I whispered to myself and took a drink. The champagne was ice-cold, crisp, and tasted exactly like liberation. The massive jet engines roared to life, vibrating through the floorboards. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied down the long runway, and launched violently into the dark night sky. I watched the sprawling grid of Portland shrink into tiny, irrelevant dots of light below me. I didn't shed a single tear. When a surgeon successfully extracts a malignant tumor, they don't cry over the loss of the tissue. They just breathe easier knowing the poison is gone. Once we hit cruising altitude, I purchased the exorbitant in-flight Wi-Fi. Not to work, but to monitor the blast radius. It was 9:00 p.m. Pacific time. Down on the ground, the corporate gala was peaking. According to my timeline, the catered dinner had ended, and the executives were transitioning to the hotel bar, transferring the tabs to their personal cards. My phone vibrated violently on the tray table. A push notification from my banking app. Transaction declined. $350 at the Grand Hotel bar. Reason: account frozen. I smiled. A real smile. A calm, terrifying smile that reached all the way to my eyes. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. Transaction declined. $420 at the Grand Hotel VIP lounge. Reason: account frozen. I could vividly picture the scene. Brad, standing at the sleek marble bar, surrounded by senior partners and heavy hitters, he was so desperate to impress. He casually tosses down my platinum emergency card, offering to buy a round of Macallan 18 to assert dominance. I could see the bartender swiping the magnetic strip. Once, twice, looking at the terminal, then sliding the card back across the marble. "I'm sorry, sir. This card is declining." And in that exact microsecond, Brad's meticulously curated illusion shatters. He frantically digs for his own debit card, runs the mental math, and realizes he barely has enough liquid cash to cover a trip to the grocery store. Panic. Visceral, suffocating panic. The notifications began rapid firing. Declines, retries, override attempts. He was cycling through every card in his wallet, desperately trying to pull cash from the lobby ATMs, hitting the exact same brick wall every single time. Access denied. All accounts frozen. The massive financial bedrock Brad had comfortably slept on for 5 years vanished into thin air. I closed the banking app, slipped on my noise-canceling headphones, reclined the seat into a flat bed, and fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep I had experienced in years. When I woke up, the plane was already beginning its descent toward New York. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac at JFK and the captain announced it was safe to use electronics, I disabled airplane mode. My phone practically jumped out of my hand. It vibrated continuously for a solid minute. 47 missed calls. Over 50 unread text messages. My lock screen was a digital waterfall of escalating terror and rage. Brad was first. 11:30 p.m. Sarah. My card is declining. Can you unfreeze the backup line immediately? Chase isn't answering my calls. 12:45 a.m. Sarah, pick up your damn phone. I can't close out this bar tab. This is incredibly humiliating. 2:15 a.m. We are at the house. The keypad is dead. The app says my admin rights are revoked. What did you do? Answer me. Then Chloe chimed in. 2:00 a.m. Open the door, Sarah. It's freezing out here and my feet are bleeding. Stop acting like a psycho. Brad again. 3:45 a.m. Sarah, where the hell are you? The garage won't open. If you don't answer, I am calling the police. And the grand finale, from my mother. 6:00 a.m. Sarah, Brad called us crying. He and your sister had to sleep in a freezing rental car. Why would you lock them out of their own house? Call me immediately. You are overreacting and ruining everything again. I scrolled through the messages slowly, breathing in the recycled cabin air. They were furious, confused, and utterly powerless. But the most amusing part was that they still didn't understand the scope of what had happened. They thought this was a temporary temper tantrum. They thought I had just snapped, and that if they yelled loud enough, I would eventually apologize, hand over the keys, and turn the ATM back on. They didn't realize the game was over, and I had taken the board with me. I grabbed my carry-on bag and walked off the plane, stepping purposefully into my new reality. I didn't reply to a single message. Let them sit in the cramped rental car. Let them explain to the neighbors why they were locked out of a house they no longer had any right to occupy. I was in New York now, and the real audit was just beginning. The chaotic electric energy of Manhattan hit me the second I walked out of the airport. It smelled of exhaust, coffee, and relentless ambition. For the first time in a decade, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. A sleek black town car, arranged by HR, was waiting at the curb. The driver nodded respectfully, loaded my heavy Samsonite into the trunk, and I slid into the cool leather interior. As the car navigated through the dense traffic toward the financial district, the morning sun reflected off the glass skyscrapers, painting the city in shades of gold and steel. I stared out the window, overwhelmed by a forgotten sense of weightlessness. The gravity of the past was gone. The toxic family guilt, Brad's suffocating mediocrity, the decades spent shrinking myself, all of it was left 3,000 miles away. The town car pulled up to an ultra-luxury high-rise near Battery Park. Apex Global Partners had secured a corporate penthouse for my first 6 months. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I stopped breathing for a second. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Hudson River and the Statue of Liberty. The interior was sleek, minimalist, and entirely untouched. No cheap souvenirs, no reminders of a man who tried to cage me, no traces of anyone else's bloated ego. It was a blank canvas, secured entirely by my own intellect. I hadn't even unzipped my suitcase when the doorbell chimed. I opened it to find a woman with piercing eyes, wearing a sharply tailored navy blue suit. She extended her hand. "Welcome to Wall Street, Sarah," she said. "I'm Diana, managing director. We are thrilled you finally accepted the offer. Your reputation for neutralizing high-level corporate disasters precedes you." "Thank you, Diana," I replied, returning her firm handshake. "I'm ready to get to work." She smiled, a predatory, corporate smile that signaled absolute competence. I knew I was in the right place. I brought the final onboarding paperwork. "Let's get the bureaucracy out of the way so you can settle in." We sat at the massive marble dining table. Diana slid a thick folder across the stone surface. I opened it and reviewed the compensation matrix. The numbers forced me to pause. A base salary of $450,000. A $50,000 signing bonus, vested stock options that would trigger after 12 months. The total package eclipsed $500,000 a year. It was a level of wealth Brad, with his rented tuxedos and fake bravado, couldn't even comprehend. I signed the documents without a second of hesitation. After Diana left, promising to see me at the office on Monday, I collapsed onto the designer sofa and booted up my personal phone. The tone of the incoming barrage from Portland had shifted. The aggressive demands had mutated into desperate begging, but buried in the flood of texts was a new voicemail from Chloe. I hit play. Her shrill voice echoed through the pristine silence of my penthouse. "Sarah, You are a vindictive psychopath. She was speaking so fast she was running out of breath. You froze the cards while we were at the bar. Brad was humiliated in front of the executive board. We had to sleep in a freezing car because you locked the house. I listened passively. For the first time, her venom didn't sting. It just sounded like validation. You're just jealous, Chloe hissed through the speaker. You've been jealous your whole life because I'm the one he actually wanted. Turn the alarm system off and open the door right now, or I swear to God I will tell the whole family how sick and cruel you are. She was still playing the victim. She genuinely believed she still held leverage. Chloe thought that if she screamed loud enough and threatened me with parental disappointment, I would fold, just like I had done since childhood. But that circuit was permanently severed. I stood up, walked over to the massive glass window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, and switched my phone to the front-facing camera. The natural lighting was flawless. I didn't smile. I just stared dead into the lens cold, untouchable, elevated. Behind me, the greatest financial empire in the world gleamed in the sunlight. I snapped the photo, opened our text thread, and attached the image. Underneath it, I typed a single message. I am exactly where I belong. Enjoy playing the devoted corporate wife while you try to figure out how to pay off his massive hidden debt. The house is mine. The money is mine. You can keep his lies. I hit send, then I permanently blocked her number. I systematically blocked my parents, Aunt Carol, and every flying monkey who had spent years manipulating me. The only contact I left unblocked was Brad, strictly because my attorney needed an open channel to serve him legal documents. I tossed the phone onto the sofa. Almost immediately, my secure corporate laptop chimed. A high-priority email from Diana. Subject: confidential, APNM and A risk assessment and personnel audit. Priority: red. I carried the laptop to the kitchen island, poured myself a glass of ice water, and opened the dossier. As my eyes scanned the executive summary, my heart skipped a beat. I looked at the target company's name, blinked, and read it again. I thought the jet lag was causing hallucinations, but it was real. Fate possesses a truly brutal sense of humor. Apex Global Partners was in the final stages of a hostile acquisition of a mid-sized marketing firm located in the Pacific Northwest. It was the exact PR firm where Brad worked. My first official mandate as the new global director of risk management was to audit the target company's payroll, identify redundancies, and liquidate dead weight before the merger closed. I stared at the glowing screen, the ice clinking softly in my glass. Less than 48 hours ago, I was called a temporary placeholder. Now, I possess the unilateral authority to end careers. There is a terrifying rush of power in looking at spreadsheets and realizing you hold the executioner's axe. To a normal analyst, data is just numbers, but this data was the autopsy of my former life. I spent my entire Sunday locked in the penthouse, ruthlessly tearing into the financial anatomy of Brad's firm. The objective was simple: trim the fat and maximize shareholder value. Diana had warned me that their marketing and PR divisions were severely bloated. My mandate was to hunt down inefficiencies, sever weak links, and prep the company for assimilation. I bypassed the macro reports and drilled straight down to the individual KPI metrics of the senior account executives. It took me less than 10 minutes to pull Brad's profile. If any part of my subconscious still doubted his professional collapse, the raw data annihilated it. His metrics were apocalyptic. For 3 consecutive quarters, he had missed his client retention quotas by over 30%. His net new acquisition rate was effectively zero. But what truly triggered the alarms was his expense account. Despite generating zero revenue growth, Brad was burning through corporate funds at an astronomical rate. Michelin star dinners, luxury box tickets, exorbitant client gifts. He was bleeding his own firm dry just to maintain the illusion that he was a rainmaker. He wasn't just an incompetent employee, he was a walking financial liability. I opened the termination recommendation portal. The interface was sterile, clinical, and devoid of emotion. I typed in his full legal name. In the justification field, I didn't write a single word about his infidelity. I didn't mention the emotional abuse, or the fact that he tried to steal my home equity. I used pure, weaponized corporate logic. Employee demonstrates a sustained, catastrophic decline in core performance metrics, compounded by gross negligence and abuse of corporate expense accounts. Retaining this asset presents an unacceptable negative ROI. Recommendation: immediate termination with cause. Zero severance. I flagged his name in red and hit save. Monday morning arrived. I put on a razor-sharp charcoal suit, pulled my hair back, and walked into the Wall Street headquarters of Apex Global Partners. The office was a temple of modern capitalism: glass, steel, and ruthless efficiency. Diana introduced me to my new division. I was surrounded by brilliant analysts with predatory instincts. Nobody here called me cold or calculated as an insult. Here, those traits were the currency of survival. At exactly 10:00 a.m., my secure desk phone rang. It was an internal transfer from Diana's office. Sarah, her crisp voice echoed through the receiver. We have a critical escalation regarding the acquisition target in Portland. Their internal audit team flagged several severe compliance violations in the PR department's expense ledger over the weekend. She paused. The head of their audit team, a guy named Kevin, is demanding an emergency consult with our risk department before the merger goes public. I'm patching him through. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the smell of blood in the water. Put him through, Diana. A second later, a heavy, exhausted voice came on the line. This is Kevin. Am I speaking with the new director of risk management? You are. This is Sarah. Walk me through the exposure, Kevin. I heard a heavy sigh on the other end. It was the sound of an auditor who hated corporate messes just as much as I did. We have a senior account executive who committed a massive breach of corporate card policy. He attended the firm's annual gala on Friday, Kevin explained. Around midnight, his personal credit cards started declining at the hotel bar. In a panic, he swiped his corporate emergency card to cover a $2,000 tab for top-shelf liquor and VIP lounge access. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, a slow, venomous smile spreading across my face. I looked at the termination list glowing on my monitor. I am reviewing the roster right now, Kevin. Can you confirm the employee's name? Brad. His name is Brad, Kevin grumbled, his voice thick with disgust. But the unauthorized bar tab is the least of our problems. When I initiated the audit on his weekend expenses, I pulled the hotel's security footage to verify his presence in the lounge. I found something else. Something that exposes this firm to catastrophic legal liability. I stayed silent, letting him hang himself. He brought a +1 to the gala, Kevin continued. A blonde woman. The cameras tracked her leaving the main ballroom during the CEO's keynote speech. She didn't go to the restroom. She took the elevator up to the penthouse VIP floor. I pulled a pen from my desk. And why does her location create liability for the firm? Because that suite was booked by our lead venture capital investor, Kevin whispered, dropping his voice. The security feeds show her knocking on his door at 10 p.m. She didn't leave until 2 in the morning, and when she walked out, she was carrying a brand new designer handbag that she definitely did not have when she went in. I froze. So, Brad used corporate funds to finance his +1, and his +1 simultaneously engaged in a highly compromising rendezvous with your lead investor? Exactly, Kevin confirmed. It's a massive conflict of interest. If the SEC or the board gets wind of this, the fallout will be nuclear. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. The sheer magnitude of the stupidity was breathtaking. Chloe's insatiable greed had cannibalized her own fairy tale. The moment she realized Brad's credit cards were bouncing and he was actually broke, she didn't hesitate. She instantly hunted down the next biggest wallet in the room. She abandoned Brad at the bar and sold herself to an aging investor for a handbag. Forward me the expense ledgers, Kevin, I said with lethal authority. Send the raw security footage directly to my encrypted Dropbox. I will neutralize this risk from our end. By the close of business today, this liability will be eliminated. I ended the call. Brad always bragged that Chloe was an incredible networker. Turns out, she really knew how to work a room. She just happened to network his career into the grave. And she had personally hand-delivered the final nail for his coffin right to my desk. 10 minutes later, the secure portal chimed. I opened the zip file. Inside was the digital autopsy of Brad and Chloe's destruction. First was the corporate ledger. It detailed every fraudulent swipe, thousands of dollars on exorbitant liquor, room service, and private lounge fees. When my money ran dry, Brad immediately started stealing from his employer to keep the charade alive. He dug his own grave. Next was the high-definition security footage. I clicked the first video file. Timestamp, Friday, 10:15 p.m. The camera was angled down a luxurious 12th floor hallway. The elevator doors parted, and Chloe stepped out. She was wearing the $12,000 emerald gown. The fabric shimmered under the halogen lights. She looked around cautiously, her heels sinking silently into the plush carpet, and walked straight to the double doors of the presidential suite. She knocked twice. The door opened to reveal William, a heavy-set, older man with his dress shirt unbuttoned. He smiled, grabbed her by the waist, and pulled her inside. I clicked the second video file. Timestamp, 2:30 a.m. The heavy doors opened again. Chloe stumbled out. Her perfect blowout was a rat's nest. Her makeup was smeared, and the delicate silk of the gown looked torn near the hem. But draped over her forearm was a brand-new, authentic Hermes Birkin bag. The exact bag she had been screaming at Brad about in my hallway. I stared at the monitor, absorbing the absolute depravity of it all. Chloe got exactly what she wanted, but the price tag was steeper than she ever imagined. She adjusted the strap of the Birkin, smoothed down her ruined $12,000 dress, and walked back to the elevator with a smug smile. She didn't just betray her sister. She betrayed the man she stole from her sister, right in the middle of a corporate event, all for a piece of leather. It was morally repulsive, but from a purely analytical standpoint, it was an incredibly efficient transaction. I needed to ensure this intelligence reached the exact people who needed to see it. However, as an executive for the acquiring firm, I had to maintain strict legal distance. I couldn't use my Apex Global email to orchestrate a personal vendetta. I needed a ghost protocol. I launched an encrypted Tor browser and generated an untraceable Proton Mail account. Then, I pulled up Chloe's public Instagram profile. As expected, she had already posted a photo from the gala. It was heavily filtered and aggressively curated. She and Brad stood in front of a massive floral arrangement in the hotel lobby. Brad's smile looked strained and terrified. But Chloe was posing like a Vogue cover model, her hand resting possessively on his chest. The caption read, "Conquering the corporate world with my incredibly successful man. Number power couple, number corporate wife." I took a screenshot of her pathetic digital illusion and attached it to the anonymous email. Right beneath her hashtag about being a loyal corporate wife, I embedded the security footage of her crawling out of the investor's suite at 2:00 a.m. with her new Birkin bag. Finally, I attached the unredacted PDF of Brad's fraudulent corporate expense report. I didn't write a menacing manifesto. I didn't send a long, emotional paragraph about karma. A lethal strike requires no dialogue. The data speaks for itself. I typed Brad's personal email address into the recipient line. I hovered my finger over the mouse. I understood the total devastation this click would unleash. Brad threw away a stable, loyal marriage for a woman who viewed him as nothing more than an ATM. Now, he was going to watch his counterfeit reality burn to the ground in high definition. I clicked send, purged the browser, leaned back in my chair, and took a slow sip of my coffee. The missile was in the air. Now, I just had to wait for impact on the West Coast. Later that afternoon, I sat in Diana's corner office, reviewing the final restructuring manifest for the Portland acquisition. "Are you absolutely certain about these cuts, Sarah?" Diana asked, tapping her Montblanc pen against the document. "We are effectively gutting their entire PR division." "I am certain," I replied, my voice devoid of hesitation. "The department is a toxic liability. The personnel are not only grossly underperforming, but they possess zero fiduciary discipline. If we sever the infected tissue before the acquisition clears escrow, Apex avoids inheriting their compliance nightmare." Diana locked eyes with me. Her sharp, calculating gaze searched my face for any trace of emotional bias or hesitation. She found nothing but titanium. I was no longer a woman asking for permission to exist. I was the architect of the slaughter. Diana nodded slowly, uncapped her pen, and signed the bottom line of the termination order. "Wire the directive to Portland HR. Have building security escort the terminated assets off the premises by 5:00 p.m. I walked back to my desk, clutching the executed warrant. I opened the official Apex corporate template, attached Diana's signature, and fired the email to the head of HR in Oregon. This Monday was going to be the most violently traumatic day of Brad's life. First, he would open his personal email and watch the high-definition destruction of his ego, realizing the woman he blew up his life for was a mercenary. And then, mere hours later, armed security guards would confiscate his keycard, hand him a cardboard box, and physically march him out of the lobby in front of all his peers. He used to tell me he needed a woman with ambition and power. Now, he was about to get steamrolled by the woman who finally realized her own net worth. But the blast radius expanded much further than I had modeled. It started early Tuesday morning, Eastern Time. I was sitting at the Quartz Island in my Manhattan penthouse, eating fresh fruit and sipping Earl Grey tea. Suddenly, my secure personal phone lit up. I didn't answer. I let it route to voicemail and watched the automated transcription software translate the audio to text in real time. It was Brad. But the voice didn't belong to the arrogant, swaggering PR executive I knew. It was the sound of a man who was completely and utterly broken. The text scrolled across my screen. "Sarah, please. I know you blocked my other number. Please pick up. I am begging you. Everything is gone." I got fired. Security dragged me out of the building in front of the whole firm. Kevin audited my expenses. The company is threatening to press felony charges if I don't repay the stolen funds. And Chloe, she used me. Someone sent me a video. She slept with William, the lead investor. She did it for a purse, Sarah. I lost my career, my reputation, and you. All for a woman who sold me out for a piece of leather. Please call me back. I was wrong. I was manipulated. You are the only one who can fix this. I read the transcription to the final word and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no grief, just the cold satisfaction of an equation balancing perfectly to zero. Even while buried under the rubble of his own life, he was still trying to dodge accountability. He was still trying to frame himself as a victim of manipulation, rather than the architect of his own treason. He wanted me to swoop in, pay off his debts, and clean up his mess. Not anymore. I deleted the voicemail. An hour later, my phone rang again. I had temporarily unblocked my parents' landline, knowing the shockwave would eventually hit them. I answered on the second ring. "Sarah," my mother's voice shrieked, laced with sheer hysteria. "What on earth did you do?" She was practically hyperventilating. "Brad is on our front lawn right now. He is screaming at your sister like a maniac. He just threw a box of his office supplies at her car. The neighbors are watching. It's an absolute nightmare." I calmly poured another cup of tea. "It sounds like they are finally communicating." "Why are you being so cold?" she sobbed, completely ignoring my tone. "He is threatening to sue her. He's telling everyone she manipulated him into embezzling corporate funds. He wants to drag her down with him." She paused, gasping for air. "You have to stop this, Sarah. Call your high-powered lawyers and force him to drop it. Chloe is far too fragile to handle a lawsuit." I listened in silence. Even standing in the wreckage, they were still shielding the golden child. 5 years ago, before Chloe fully mutated into a parasite, and before Brad's ego poisoned his brain, my father made a catastrophic financial error. Richard took out a massive second mortgage on their house to bankroll a buddy's tech startup. The startup vaporized in 6 months. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings, and my parents were weeks away from being thrown onto the street. They called me sobbing, begging for salvation. I had just received my first massive corporate bonus. I could have just written them a check, but my analytical mind knew better. If you hand a lump sum of cash to people who lack financial literacy, you don't fix the problem. You just delay the inevitable. So, I didn't hand them a check. I engineered a failsafe. I hired a boutique wealth management firm to create an anonymous LLC trust. My trust bought the distressed debt directly from the bank, paid off the mortgage in full, and quietly transferred the title of the house to my LLC. I allowed my parents to stay in the home, charging them a microscopic fraction of market rent. I told them a private angel investor had stepped in to save their property. They were so relieved they didn't even bother to read the fine print on the lease agreement. For 5 years, they never realized the invisible landlord they were paying rent to was their own invisible daughter. Now, they were plotting to use that exact same house as collateral to rescue Chloe. They wanted to march into a bank, pull equity out of a house they didn't own, and use the cash to shield their golden child from the consequences of her own actions. It was Wednesday morning in Portland. I pictured my parents marching into the sterile bank lobby, faces tight with stress, demanding a loan against their property. Right on cue, my phone rang. It was Michael, my wealth manager in Oregon. "Good afternoon, Sarah," Michael said, his voice a smooth baritone of professional detachment. "I assume you know why I'm calling." "I do," I replied, watching the ferries cross the Hudson River. "How did they take the news?" Michael let out a dry chuckle. The loan officer explained that they could not initiate a cash-out refinance because they are not the legal deed holders of the property. Your father demanded to know who controlled the trust. As per your written instructions, the bank unsealed the LLC documentation and revealed you as the sole beneficiary. A brief pause hung on the line. "From what the branch manager told me, your father went completely white," Michael continued. "Security had to bring him a chair because his knees gave out." Excellent work, Michael, I said. Execute Phase 3. Understood. The 30-day notice of eviction has already been dispatched via certified courier. It will be taped to their front door before noon. I ended the call. They chose to protect the woman who nuked my marriage. They demanded I pay for her sins. Now, they were about to learn a brutal lesson in macroeconomics. You cannot leverage an asset you no longer own. But the legal warfare wasn't over. While my parents collided with reality, Brad launched a desperate, flailing counterattack. Rachel, my attorney, forwarded me the court filings. Brad had hired a bottom-feeder divorce lawyer and filed an emergency petition in family court. He demanded exorbitant spousal support, 50% of my stock portfolio, and exclusive possession of the Portland house. His legal narrative was a masterclass in gaslighting. He claimed he sacrificed his own soaring career to support my demanding corporate lifestyle, that I abandoned him across the country, and intentionally inflicted severe emotional distress. He petitioned the judge to force me to pay his legal fees, wipe out his credit card debt, and surrender my real estate. I didn't panic. My heart rate didn't elevate by a single beat. I plugged in my encrypted hard drive and fired a 300-page forensic dossier to Rachel. It contained bank ledgers, metadata from the credit pulls, IP logs from the smart home, and the W-2S proving he was demoted due to incompetence, not marital sacrifice. But the crown jewel of the file was the ironclad prenuptial agreement Brad had signed 5 years ago, arrogantly assuming I would never enforce it. The emergency hearing took place via Zoom. I logged into the secure judicial portal from my office in Manhattan. On the screen, Brad sat in a cramped, poorly lit attorney's office. He looked decimated. His skin was gray, dark bags hung under his eyes, and his cheap suit hung loosely on his frame. He was aggressively playing the role of the broken, abused victim. The judge, a stern woman with decades of family law experience, peered through her webcam and hefted my 300-page forensic audit into view. "Mr. Brad," the judge said, her voice dripping with absolute zero tolerance, "I have reviewed your petition for emergency spousal support, as well as the respondent's counterfiling." Brad's sleazy attorney immediately jumped in. "Your Honor, my client has been financially decimated by his wealthy spouse. He is currently forced to live out of a rental car because she illegally locked him out of the marital home." The judge slammed her hand onto her desk, silencing the lawyer instantly. "That property is legally deeded solely to the respondent, purchased prior to the marriage," the judge snapped. "Furthermore, the financial forensics provided clearly demonstrate that your client committed systematic financial fraud, draining the respondent's credit lines to fund a luxury lifestyle and an extramarital affair." Brad physically shrank into his chair. The color drained from his face. He looked like a man watching the ground open up beneath him. "You are not a victim, sir," the judge continued, staring directly into the camera. "You are a fraud who got caught." She flipped to the final page of the dossier. "Your request for spousal support is denied in its entirety. The respondent's motion to recover the $40,000 you fraudulently extracted from her credit lines is granted." The judge paused, adjusting her glasses. "I highly suggest you find employment quickly. That debt will accrue interest." The sharp crack of a gavel echoed through the speakers. Brad stared at the screen in abject horror, his eyes locked onto my video feed. His lips moved, silently mouthing my name. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't offer a single word of closure. I just moved my mouse and clicked, "Leave meeting." The screen went black. The audit was complete. The ledger was balanced to 0. As the dust settled over the crater of my former life, everything became remarkably clear. When you rip the financial spine out of a parasitic ecosystem, the organism collapses faster than anyone expects. Chloe, predictably, did not stick around to face the music. 2 days after the bank rejected the loan, she packed her designer luggage, stole the last of my mother's emergency cash from a coffee can in the kitchen, and vanished. According to Aunt Carol's frantic Facebook posts, Chloe flew to South Beach, Miami, to crash with a club promoter she met on Instagram. She left Brad to drown in debt, and abandoned my parents to face the eviction squad. After all their manipulation tactics failed, my parents were finally forced to ingest the reality of their choices. 30 days after the notice was served, the sheriff's department arrived to supervise the lockout. Richard and Linda packed their meager belongings into a rented U-Haul and drove away from the fortress they had used to worship Chloe and belittle me. Because of my father's ruined credit, no reputable landlord would approve them. They ended up in a dingy, weekly rate motel on the industrial outskirts of Portland. For the first time in their lives, there was no invisible daughter to absorb the impact of their failures. The beautiful suburban home was professionally staged, listed by my wealth manager, and sold to a tech executive for a massive premium. But Brad's freefall was the most spectacular. Stripped of his job, his reputation, and his stolen credit lines, he became radioactive in the PR industry. The scandal regarding the investor's penthouse suite became an open secret in the corporate sector. The last update I received through legal channels was that his rental car was repossessed. He was currently sleeping on a stained mattress in a windowless basement apartment, desperately trying to figure out how to pay back the $40,000 court judgment he owed me. They all thought they were the main characters in a high-stakes luxury drama. They failed to realize they were just toxic liabilities on my balance sheet, and I finally decided to write them off. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my Manhattan penthouse. It was a crisp, brilliant Tuesday morning. I wore a tailored charcoal blazer, holding a cup of Earl Grey tea. Below me, the financial capital of the world pulsed with energy, a place where execution, intelligence, and leverage were the only things that mattered. My phone buzzed softly on the Marble Island. A new email notification. I walked over and opened it. My mother had managed to circumvent the block by creating a brand new Gmail account. Sarah, the text read, "We are living in a filthy motel. The AC is broken. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high, and we don't have enough cash for his medication. Brad is basically homeless. Chloe won't answer our calls. I know we made mistakes, but we are still your family. Please, have some mercy. Wire us a few $1,000s so we can get his pills and eat a decent meal. I am begging you." I read the words slowly. For a microsecond, the phantom ghost of guilt tried to claw its way up my throat, the exact same guilt that had controlled me for decades, the guilt that forced me to surrender my college tuition, the guilt that made me tolerate a sister who stole from me, and a husband who viewed me as a walking ATM. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The cool, filtered air of the penthouse filled my lungs. I opened my eyes and looked at my reflection in the dark television screen. I didn't see a terrified girl begging for her family's love anymore. I saw a global executive, a predator in a tailored suit, a woman who survived an assassination attempt on her life and built an empire on the ashes. I felt no rage. I felt no sorrow. I felt nothing but absolute, unbreakable apathy. I looked down at the phone, swiped left on the email, and tapped delete. The message vanished into the digital void, permanently relegated to the past. I set the phone down, grabbed my leather briefcase, and walked out the door, stepping into a life that belonged entirely to me. Just yesterday, my mother sent that desperate email begging for money for my father's medication, pleading for mercy. I read her words, took a sip of my tea, and hit delete without sending a single reply. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. Was I too ruthless? Should I have extended an olive branch to the people who were once my family? Or was the devastation they faced the exact right price for years of manipulation, theft, and betrayal? Let me know in the comments how you would have handled the situation. If you resonated with this story, and if you've ever had to go scorched earth to protect your peace and your future, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself, trust your instincts, and never, ever let anyone treat you like a temporary placeholder in your own life.